Nominations have closed for the Scottish Conservative leadership race. It'll be a two-horse race with interim leader Jackson Carlaw taking on Michel Ballantyne. Here's Mr Carlaw launching his campaign earlier this week.
I've led our battle through a tough general election. I think I've shown I've got the right stuff. So yes, I feel I am tested, that I do have the experience to take us forward as a party and to win even greater success in the future. I've spent the last 18 months taking on Nicola Sturgeon. I'm asking you to let me spend the next 18 months taking her down.
Michel Ballantyne is a Selkirk-based List MSP and is the party's social security spokesperson at Holyrood. Here she is speaking to the Good Morning Scotland programme.
I stand by my record of what I actually do. I have spent over 30 years working with deprived families, improving lives for people. You know, I have created a manufacturing company. I've employed people. I've enabled people to get on their feet. I've headed up charities that enable people to build resilience and get out of the poverty they're in. You know, I have actually worked in the health service for many years. I do it. I don't just talk about it. I'm not a virtuous signaller.
Well, I'm joined now by Ramsay Jones, who's a former special advisor to David Cameron, and Dan McCroskey, a young Conservative activist. Morning to both of you.
Good morning.
Ramsay, Michel Ballantyne said she was standing because she wanted a proper debate. Are there any significant differences between the two of them?
Well, I think there are, but I think that's what the contest will allow the membership to actually see. I mean, most elections, unless there is some overriding constitutional row on the constitutional example sitting aside, there's always a debate about, is it time for a change? And there's also the argument that in any contest for a leadership of a party, you want to see the candidates tested in the heat of that debate and the heat of that battle. Now, the other reason sometimes you always want a contest is because you want to make sure they have been tested in the wider sphere. Now, arguably, Jackson already has been in terms that he was interim leader, but I think it's a good thing for parties to have a contest. I think it's a great thing as well that this one will only be about 3.5 weeks long, unlike certain other leadership battles that seem to be stretching over the next 25 months.
Well, Dan McCroskey, which way are you leaning?
I'm doing one of these rare things in politics where I keep my opinion to myself on this one. I mean, I don't think I've completely decided, but I want to see what both candidates have to say. I went to Jackson's launch on Monday, and I think it was a very good launch. Michelle's launching on Monday as well, so interesting to see what her policy platform is and what she has to say.
But as of now, can you discern any significant difference between them?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been well reported that, you know, Michelle backed Boris in the leadership contest. She voted to leave. Jackson voted to remain. Backed a different candidate. And I think, you know, we don't really know what the policy differences are between two candidates. We've heard a little bit from Jackson on Monday at his launch about what he wants to do. Michelle will hopefully talk a bit about policy at her launch. And I think that's the moment that you'll see any clear water differences between the two candidates.
Well, Ramsay, second independence referendum is going to be one of the big issues whoever it is has to deal with. The line at the moment that's been expressed by Alistair Jack and by Boris Johnson of no, go away, possibly works up until the 2021 election. But does it work after that, do you think?
Frankly, the answer to that, I don't think either candidate, and I don't think the leadership in London or here in Scotland is going to give you any other answer other than it was once in a generation, full stop, and frankly, probably not engage in that question until the day after the election and give every indication that nothing will even change after that. Because that certainty on a constitutional question is a winning formula when it comes to elections, certainly within Scotland and arguably right across the UK just now. So I don't think that's going to be a dividing factor between the two candidates. It is, as in all these cases, it's the personality, it's the raw politics, and then it's the policies that people will want to sit and examine.
Yeah, well, but Dan, when it comes to policies, yes, of course the Conservatives would like to talk about other things than another independence referendum, but I mean, although they didn't do that well in the last election, you've still held on to a base of MPs. There's a good base of MSPs, and it's largely been won on the basis of being the party that represents unionism, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we are undoubtedly the only unionist party, really, and I think the last election demonstrated that can take the challenge to the SNP, can fight a good election, although that wasn't, you know, maybe not the outcome that anyone necessarily wanted. You know, it was still as Jackson pointed out, actually on Monday, our second best result in 25 years, so that can't be sniffed at. And but the next few weeks has to be not just talking about independence, has to be talking about what both leadership candidates will do for the party, what kind of policy platform they'll set out. I mean, I'm not expecting massive, a manifesto of policies in the next couple of weeks, but I think members need to know what both candidates stand for, what their top priorities would be if they become leader, and what they'll be focused on over the next 14, 15 months.
The point I was trying to make about independence referendum, Ramsey, is that whatever extra policies on lots of different areas the Conservatives develop in Scotland, that issue is going to be, in a way, it suits the Tories and it suits the SNP more than it suits other parties for that to be the main issue.
There is 100% agree with that, but it suits most of all the Scottish National Party as the incumbent government to fight an election on anything other than the record as a government. Look at Boris Johnson's 80 majority, an election fought on the one issue of Brexit, not on the record as a government. So that's why I think both candidates will say our position on Indy Ref 2 is fixed. Therefore, let's get back to talking about the other big ticket issues. And I think most of the next period between now and May next year, they'll say that's where we stand in the Constitution. Now, what about houses? What about hospitals? What about our schools? What about transport? What about infrastructure? What about forging a new way of doing politics in the United Kingdom? That's the battleground they'll want to move on to.
I wonder if, Dan, it was interesting that the first thing that Jackson Carlo announced were plans to cut taxes in Scotland for those on what he claims are middle incomes. Michel Ballantyne has talked about being a party for blue-collar workers in Scotland. Isn't the latter perhaps more in tune with the vibes we're getting from the Boris Johnson government?
Slightly. I mean, I think, Jackson talked about redressing the tax balance for working in middle Scotland, which I think chimes with a lot of voters and what they think, particularly, because he talked about the £25,000 to £40,000 bracket. I'm somebody that probably falls squarely into that, and I'm not a rich person by any stretch of the imagination. So if that chimes with other people across Scotland, then I think it's a successful formula. Michelle's talked about a blue-collar revolution, so is Jackson, actually. I think obviously, though, it's interesting to talk about blue-collar, but we need to see what the detail is in that, because it's easy to have a slogan and it's easy to say, this is my pitch, blue-collar revolution, say it over and over again, but it has to be backed up by some substance. And I think that'll be the interesting thing over the next couple of weeks, to see what the policies are that both candidates will pitch that back up this talk of a blue-collar revolution.
Gordon, can I give you one brief thought? Because I think it's the key that we've not really touched on. And that is that in leadership elections, it is understanding the selectorate that you're appealing to and understanding what's going to shift their vote. Now, traditionally, you might think, therefore, you have to appeal to the raw red meat of conservatism. But actually, I think the Conservative Party in Scotland and the UK has been very good at saying, not who do I most like or who most appeals to me, but who can win with the country. And the candidate that does best will understand the electorate and the way they are likely to vote.
Something that will be important, Ramsey, for the Conservatives in Scotland, presumably, is when I did an interview with Alistair Jack last Sunday, he was pretty vehement in saying that in the spending review that Sajid Javid has announced to rebalance spending away from London and the South East towards the northern areas of England that turned to the Tories in the last election, he wants some areas of Scotland to be included in that too, presumably not the whole of Scotland, because some areas are doing very, very nicely, thank you. But that's going to be pretty important, that the British government, the Boris Johnson government, can demonstrate that areas of Scotland are in the same category as some of these areas they're trying to help in England.
Absolutely it will, and purely through the Barnett formula, much of that would flow to Scotland anyway, as it's done from other big infrastructure projects.
Well, yeah, but that's not good enough, though, isn't it? They've got to show that the British government is intervening to help areas that are following behind.
Yeah, there's two things there. There will be money, and I think there'll be shared prosperity funds. There'll be other initiatives, I'm pretty sure, as well, similar to the city deals, where perhaps instead of it being geography that determines how spending is done on a sort of negotiated basis with the Scottish Government and others. It'll be sectoral ones for particular industries or ideas. But also, there will be coming through the Dunlop Review, hopefully in the next few weeks, a rethinking, a remodelling, a new way of embedding thinking about all parts of the United Kingdom into the heart and soul of the way the UK government operates. That will matter greatly as well for the relationship, not just between the governments, for the parties' prospects here too.
Well, Dan, what do you make of that idea that the Conservative government in London has to show? I mean, it is, after all, the government of Scotland, and
Yep.
the danger is that from their point of view is that people up here forget that they need to project themselves more.
Well, absolutely, without a doubt. And I mean, obviously the Conservatives won in places that we haven't won in, hundreds of years. In some constituencies, never ever won in the north of England, particularly. The government has to embrace the whole of the United Kingdom. But I think what we need to do better is, particularly when money comes to Scotland as a result of Barnet or big infrastructural projects or things like city deals, we have to be far better about branding it with this is money from the UK, this is UK investment in Scotland, in the same way that anything that's delivered by the European Union has had a big EU flag stamped on it. We need to do the same with the Union Jack. It's about saying this is Britain's investment in Scotland, Britain's investment in the north of England, wherever, but so that people understand where it comes from, who's investing in it, so that frankly the SNP don't get all the credit when anything good happens.
OK, we'll have to leave it there for the moment. Ramsey Jones, Dan McCroskey, thank you both very much indeed.